It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans, and I will be your host this morning. Joining you live from Missouri. You're joining us in our third segment this morning, and we've covered a couple of other topics. First, the newest IRS scam out there that the IRS is now retaining and confiscating your refund based on on parental and grandparental debt that you may or may not owe. Social Security Administration has come out and said that they made overpayments to 400,000 people going back as far as the 1960s, and they were your parents and your grandparents, and they're keeping your refund to pay for it. Hello. Ladies and gentlemen, you can't get less constitutional than that. I mean, it wasn't your debt. Your parents incurred it. By the way, this ties in with a theory I've been seeing some discussion about how you can be held responsible for bankruptcies of your parents as well. That's another topic they've been floating kind of the goal of all of this, by the way, is to draw the resources off of America so that we're not in a position where we can defend ourselves fiscally and or physically. If you can't afford to buy a gun and you can't afford to buy some food to stock it up, then they can bring a collapse about all the sooner, right? And that's really what this is about, folks. Everything that happens and touches you in your life right now is geared and designed to accomplish one task, your enslavement. And I want you to be painfully, abundantly, blatantly aware of it. In our second topic, we talked about a Bundy Ranch update, and that was how a new raid has been planned. And I never got to what Harry Reid had to say because, frankly, I got wrapped up more in the idea of wanting you to understand the depth of the depravity of the people that are plotting your demise. I encouraged you to take a few minutes and have a conversation with yourself to evaluate, analyze, and look at the evidence that is mounted everywhere, and then come to an honest conclusion. Do you believe, as a juror, that guilt on this issue is mandated? Do you believe that, looking at all the evidence, there should be no doubt left in your mind as to where we're headed? I think America is trying hard to go back to sleep. It's kind of like, the alarm is going off and you just all you want is to go back to sleep. What you don't realize is that this isn't just a normal wake-up alarm that you can hit the snooze button for 10 minutes. The house is on fire. And your failure to wake up may well mean your demise. In this topic, we're going to look at the federal army. And I got to tell you, if this doesn't blow it up right clearly for you, what a betrayal is being, and how the plotting is moving in so many fronts. I mean, the diamond has multiple facets, and each facet is being attacked. There's a whole series of articles out there. There's one in the Washington Times. There's one in Defense One. There's another one on breakingdefense.com. And then there's another one on defensenews.com. And all of them read like a fairly similar litany. The Army goes to war with the National Guard. They're seizing the National Guard's Apache attack helicopters. There are 192 Apache attack helicopters on active duty. And these are all owned by National Guard. So essentially, they're used for internal enforcement of and protection of those individual 50 sovereign states, right? The premise of a National Guard was to act as a militia, a state-sponsored, state-owned militia that would be able to defend that individual state against a tyrannical federal government out of control. That was the original premise of a National Guard. During George Bush's reign of treason, he changed the nature and the rules under which National Guards operated, and he federalized the National Guard. Now, many of you don't realize this, but back after Katrina, he passed an executive order that said that going forward, the federal government did not need to get a governor's permission to nationalize and place under federal control the National Guard for that state. And the reason behind that, and the reason he used that as an excuse, was because Katrina, in large part, became a debacle because the governor of Louisiana did not give the federal government permission to come in and federalize their National Guard. And so there was like no coordination, and everybody was all over the place, and there was nobody. I mean, for all the trillions of dollars we've spent on FEMA and all of these agencies that are supposed to jump in and save the day, none of it's worked, and all of it is cronyism, and all of it is theft, and all of it is really designed for one thing, not to protect you from a national disaster or a natural disaster, but to figure out how to utilize all that power, effort, money, and time to enslave you. You want proof? Go look at Storm Sandy in New Jersey, where people are still homeless. Where is FEMA? FEMA, the same FEMA we've spent hundreds of billions of dollars on. Yeah, that same FEMA. I mean, there's people still living in hotels, ladies and gentlemen. Still, to this day. The truth is, this is an act of treason. For the federal government to betray the National Guard, for the states to allow this to happen, is their acquiescence and agreement with the treason that is being perpetrated on you as a citizen by a federal government, and they are cowing. They are on their knees. Your state governments are on their knees praying before their master, the federal government. The headline on BreakingDefense.com is Budgets and Betrayal. National Guard fights to keep their Apache gunships. That's what one National Guard gunship pilot told me when I asked him about the Army's plan to strip the National Guard of all of its AH-64 Apache attack helicopters. That plan, quote, still awaiting approval by President Obama before he includes it in his budget request for fiscal year 2015, is just one part of a radical overhaul that includes a complex downsizing and a reshuffling of the Army's entire helicopter force. Here's the problem, folks. They're taking these attack helicopters and they're giving them back. They're taking 192 Apache attack choppers and they're giving them back 111 UH-60 Blackhawks. Now, these are transport and utility choppers. And the reason they are is because there's a flood of them coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And what they want to do is, think of it this way. They're taking away your AR-15 and they're giving you back a spitball shooter, a rubber band gun. They can give you any justification for restructuring based on budgetary issues. That's all a lie. What this really is an effort to disarm the states. It's nothing more than a disarmament of 50 states by a tyrant based in Washington, D.C. 10 square miles. That's it. That's all they're authorized to own. That is all they are authorized to control. The states are 50 autonomous, independent governments who are guaranteed a Republican form of government. You bought and paid for these Apache attack helicopters. Now they're being taken. And they're being taken by the enemy. Hello? This restructuring, and they can call it whatever they want. They can say it's a cost-saving measure. But I'm got to tell you, what this really is one step closer to complete federal totalitarianism, where your state is no longer a sovereign entity with independence to make its own decisions, to implement that which is in the best interest of its citizens. What this is a stripping of the defense of 50 states by a tyrannical federal government. National Guard Chief General Frank Grass testified at a hearing about this. Now, here's what he had to say. None of us like what we're having to do. My big concern right now is figuring out how I'm going to move and how many states I'm going to have an impact on, and what's the cost of facilities and to retrain pilots. I've got to tackle that because the decision's been made. I want you to skip all the fluff that he gave you before, because what it is he's accepting the order. This is like, I want you to just contemplate this for a moment, because this is essentially what we're seeing. Think of what happened in Crimea. How am I correlating the two? Well, what's essentially happened is the federal government is taking over, like Russia took over Crimea, and the local guards, the local military commanders in Crimea said, "Yup, we want to be part of the Russian enclave, and we're willing to surrender our national sovereignty, in this case state sovereignty, to the new regime incoming, the Russians." This is the new regime incoming, the federal government. The National Guard Chief General Frank Grass is the leading commander for the National Guard. He's turning over his sword and surrendering to the federal government. The problem is he's surrendering your doggone weapons. What really matters here in his statement, because we know he's surrendering, is the final statement he made. I've got to tackle that because the decision's been made. You see, that was the slip of the tongue that says this isn't about a budget that may happen in 2015. This is a decision that's been taken because, and it's being covered up with an argument that it has to do with budgets. But the decision's been made to disarm the states. Hello? The National Guard as a force has already been federalized based on George Bush's claims back in tyranny, by the way, treason, okay? George Bush's treason, yes, treason. You can tell Karl Rove I said that. His treason, back when he federalized the National Guards and said, we don't need the governor's permission to initiate the federal guard, to activate the National Guard, and to utilize federal guard and National Guard and federalize them for our own purposes. And they used them liberally during Iraq and Afghanistan, just to cement the new mentality. Now they're going to disarm them. Now they're going to take away attacked helicopters that I guarantee you will be used by a federal government in tyranny in a civil war against the people of the United States of America. I guarantee it. They're not going to use these helicopters for anything else. What else? We're not fighting another war anywhere else. We're pulling out of Afghanistan. We're out of Iraq. Where are they going to use them? Who are they going to use them against? They already own hundreds and hundreds and thousands of them anyway. You see, the Apache, unlike the Blackhawk, is an attack helicopter. It is intended for offensive action. Combine that with all of the massive surveillance, with the president's declaration that it's okay for him to kill any American he feels is appropriate based on the fact that they are a belligerent in the war on terror. Yeah, the homegrown war on terror, the one that the DHS has been demonizing Christians and constitutionalists and everybody from the Mormons, for crying out loud, to the Catholic Church. The people who carry around pocket constitutions that have been labeled as domestic extremists, yeah, those are going to be the targets. Yes, the 8 million people as of 1998 in the Main Core database, which has now grown to at least double that under President Barack Hussein Obama, the 16 million Americans that have been labeled as belligerents that can be held under the 2012 National Defense Authorization Act for indefinite detention based on a belligerent act. Hello? Ladies and gentlemen, you don't have to be a seamstress to sew this and look at this fabric and recognize that you've taken and crocheted a picture of tyranny out of disparate various pieces of colored thread. We are about to enter a new era in the history of America. You're living it right now. And what that era is the era of declared civil war, or undeclared for that matter, against the civilians and the citizens of the United States of America. Let me tell you something. Everybody who showed up at that Bundy Ranch over the course of the weekend, they had drones flying over that area. They were monitoring and capturing license plates, facial recognition. I got to tell you, folks, I don't think you understand the depth of the depravity of these people who are plotting your demise. And if you're not an active combatant, it won't be your physical demise. They want enough of us around to work. But those who stand up, those sheep who have said, bah, something's wrong, hello, help, they'll be put down, they'll be culled. They'll be re-educated, re-indoctrinated. Your children are being indoctrinated as we speak. Hence Common Core. Hence the public school system. Hence Melissa Harris Perry telling us that we no longer own our children, that they belong to all of us. They're not yours. They're ours as a collective. I can give you 1,000 examples. I don't have the time this morning. You don't need me to give you the examples. You've seen them yourself. The question is, have you made the hard decision to draw the conclusion that is the only viable conclusion you can come to? Have you made your decision as a juror to say, I look at the evidence, I've heard the testimony, I've seen the evidence in front of me, I've seen the blood, I've seen the weapon, I've seen the plot in writing, in the handwriting of the accused. And I have made the decision that he is guilty. He is your federal government. He is the usurper. He, and I don't mean Barack Obama, I'm talking about everything that hovers on the 10 square miles of Washington, D.C., which is being driven by a group of corporations, multinationals and massive, and they're interested in profit. They're not necessarily interested in your demise. They want you to be good workers to provide for this small oligarchy. But the federal government is going to be their enforcer, their police force. They pass the laws that are bought and paid for by the corporatocracy. The corporatocracy. Remember that word, because that's an important one. There is a corporatocracy at work here that is seeking not national boundaries, not national sovereign borders, not independent nation states, not independent 50 states that have their own Republican guaranteed form of government. They don't care about that. They don't want it. Why? Because it gets in the way of commerce. It gets in the way of the ticks bleeding you dry of whatever resources you have. And after they're done with you and they discard your desiccated corpse, then they will go after all of the resources that we've interspersed around the globe and made them all middle class. Hello. They've primed the pump with America. They've bought and sold our Congress, our government itself. And this is just one more domino in the overall picture. The federal government seizing, taking an entire fleet of Apaches, seizing them. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an act of war against 50 states. An act of war. A federal government act of war. If you don't see that for what it is, you're pretending because you don't want to acknowledge the truth. When the federal government comes in and strips the states of their ability to defend and protect themselves against the federal government and tyranny, using a weapon which, frankly, is no different than them coming in and taking your AR-15. This is the equivalent of the government coming in and saying, everybody's got to turn in their guns, and what we're going to give you back is a bunch of slingshots. There's no difference, ladies and gentlemen. None whatsoever. The only difference here is the size of the weapon. I'll list these stories in the YouTube body. I'll put them up on our Facebook page and on America's Voice Now. If you're not paying attention to what's going on, folks, I swear to goodness, I don't know how many more times I can expose what's happening here. At some point, you've got to come alive and recognize where we are. You've been listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. If you're catching our show live on America's Voice Now, or on video on any of our sites where we distribute, just stick with us. In 1 minute, we'll come back with the next segment. We're going to tackle our last segment this morning, which is the real reason for Benghazi, which was really stripping or moving weapons over from Libya to Syria. And we're also going to talk about an update for the New York State gun system, which is essentially the United States of America and the state of New York stripping the firearms from, they actually, their SAFE Act allows them to seize firearms without a warrant. Folks, I mean, come on, how much more evidence can I give you? We'll be back in just a minute. Please make sure that you